complaints up to ankle since 4 days, which is for fitting time. Complaints of constipation since 4 days. No history of fever, cough, cold or burning exudation. The urine output was normal. History of severe complaints 15 days back. She was admitted in an outside hospital for 2 days. Patient is a known case of diabetes mellitus type 1 since she was 12 years old. And is on insulin therapy using Mixtard. She is not a known case of hypertension, asthma, tuberculosis, coronary artery disease, and no history of blood transfusions. Personal history, she has history of decreased appetite since 4 days. On general examination, patient is conscious, tolerant, cooperative, oriented to time, place, and person. Pallar is present and no signs of vicarious sinuses and clubbing. Bilateral pedal edema extended up to ankles of fitting type. Signs of malnutritional dehydration are present.
Show us the signs. So this is showing your abdomen, which is basically to tell you that it's not the visceral fat which has caused diabetes. That would be type 2. This is type 1. Okay, so anything in the legs other than the ankles? Nothing. Huh? Fitting edema. Fitting edema. Let's go now. Fine. She is malnourished. Looking at one hand. So a malnourished type 1 diabetic started at 12 years of age. Now after 10 years, she is an expert diabetic. She knows a lot about diabetes, much more than any of us. And she knows how to manage her insulin. She takes her insulin by herself. So what happened? How did she land up in diabetic ketoacidosis? Because whatever she has told you, the history is that of a diabetic ketoacidosis. Yeah, so prior to that, she developed an infection. Yes, so developed an infection. So how does infection precipitate decay? Inflammatory glucocorticoids, stress relief, and all that. So very, very interesting mechanism. So ultimately insulin deficiency and the glucose cycle being aborted, fatty acid cycle activation, increased ketone bodies. So that is what has happened here. Huh? Yes, increased glucose. Basically glucose is not being utilized, not production. Glycogenolysis. You see the treatment is working. 541, 531, 541 again, 424, 312. So how much insulin is going here? That's not mentioned. But here it is 6 ml per hour. I am assuming 6 ml per hour as it starts. So the initial is a steep drop. After that it's going again, 280, 2 ml per hour. From 6 ml it has been brought down. And 2 ml. So what is our aim in insulin management and decay? Are we managing the blood sugar or are we managing the ketones? Basically our goal is to reduce ketones. Now we are not concerned about blood sugar. Our main thing is ketones. So we have to see that the ketones are coming down. So how do we see that? We have to keep retesting the ketones and seeing whether the ketones, that is the end point, the ketones. So what is this? What we do generally at this point in time is we give blood sugar, we give glucose and then we continue the insulin. Because ultimately we are not treating the glucose, blood glucose, we are treating the ketones. So we give blood glucose and then we keep on giving the insulin. So it has happened here. So what happened to this girl was, it was managed very well in the first day. After some 1 or 2-3 days she again relapsed into a decay. So what was that? Why did that happen? So do we have the charts to suggest what was going on here?
Pallar icterus, cyanosis, pedal edema, clubbing or lymphadenopathy. At the time of admission, his vitals were
What is the hand injuries for?
pictures of general examination.
Yeah, but general examination is like the chest and hands together and the legs below the neck. Okay. So they have been taken separately. Okay, let's focus on the chest and let's start describing the chest. Examine findings.
On systemic examination, serious.
So, what is the first thing you notice on inspection of the chest? What is the scar for? Yes, midline sternotomy. So that means the sternotomy was done and the entire chest was exposed. The heart was opened up. So it's an open heart surgery which is undergone. Probably it is required a cardiopulmonary bypass. What will you feel? You will feel something in your hand. And what will be the next thing you will do? You will localize it with your finger like this. Okay, where is that thing which you are feeling? It will coming in the chest and you will put your finger there to localize it. Now, once you put your finger there, will you be able to localize it to at least 2.5 centimeters? Or is it that you are feeling it here, an impulse, and the impulse is you are feeling here also? In fact, you are not able to separate the impulse which is coming from everywhere. So you have to see that. With your finger, are you able to localize the impulse to a limited area or are you feeling it everywhere? If you are feeling it everywhere, then what kind of apex is it? Then it is a diffuse right ventricular apex. And if you are localizing it to a very small area like 2.5 centimeters, 1 point, then it is a left ventricular divergence. Which means the left ventricle may or may not have a problem. Generally, normally you can have a left ventricular apex. But yes, abnormally also the left ventricle is abnormal, dilated, malfunctioning, you will have a left ventricular divergence. Where it will be actually around 2.5 centimeters. Where you can localize it very well. Beyond that, you won't be able to localize. You won't feel any apex feeling. But in this patient, I think we were feeling the apex everywhere. Here also, here also, here also, and it was merging with this impulse. So first you put a hand here, then you put your hand here to feel the parasternal impulse. So parasternal impulse, there is a heaving. If you put your hand here, you will feel that your hand is moving up and down like this. And you will not be able to squash it. If you try to squash it, it will still be coming. That's a grade 3 parasternal. And the next movement after you do this is your hand coming like this. Your hand coming like this. On top of the second, on the base of the heart. So apex, parasternal area, base of the heart. That is where your hand comes. And in the base of the heart, here, you could feel a very beautiful tapping sound. You can also feel the same parasternal leaf lifting your hand. At the same time, in between that lift, you can feel a sharp sound, which is tapping your hand. So that is the second sound, which is palpable. The second sound is very palpable when the pulmonary sound is very loud. So that is the palpable P2, which is very good. So that only suggests everything suggests that there is a severe pulmonary hypertension. These are all features of severe pulmonary hypertension. Diffuse orbital apex and the parasternal heave, which is right ventricular hypertrophy. There is epigastric pulsation also, if you can take. So ideally, all these things could have been taken as a video. Maybe you will do that. Take as a video, look at that, this rising and all. You can take that. And of course, you cannot make everybody palpate on this video. You cannot do the palpation. That technology is not there. But at least that visual thing you can show. So everything is suggestive of a severe pulmonary hypertension. Now, what is the commonest cause of pulmonary hypertension? These are recurring themes, all the time we discuss here. Whenever we have a cardiac problem, most of the time they will have pulmonary hypertension. And what is the cause of pulmonary hypertension? Either commonest cause is right ventricular failure is a result of pulmonary hypertension. Because pulmonary artery is above the right ventricle. So if the pressures are high, then the right ventricle will fail. So right ventricular failure is because of pulmonary hypertension. But what causes pulmonary hypertension? Commonest cause. Yes, left ventricular failure. So left ventricular failure in effect causes right ventricular failure. So the commonest cause of right ventricular failure is left ventricular failure. So we have to figure out whether he has got a left ventricular failure, in which case his left ventricular apex should have been dropped and localized. So that is one thing which is taking us away from left ventricle, but it's still possible that in palpatory we could not get it. The other thing is, what is the second commonest cause which we yesterday discussed with some of your final years presenting that case? Second cause of pulmonary arterial hypertension. Huh? 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 Yeah. There is left ventricular failure. See, aortic stenosis is left ventricular outflow lung disease, all kinds of chronic lung disease where the lung is destroyed. Hypoxia. So there is hypoxia that causes reflex pulmonary vasodilation. That causes obviously right ventricular failure because the pulmonary arteries are all blocked, constricted. Right ventricle cannot pump, it will fail. So that is what right ventricular failure or hypertrophy is due to. Second is, basically pulmonary hypertension because of lung cause. And third cause, very interestingly, is near the left ventricle. There is also a valvular heart disease, but it is not a left ventricular cause. Actually, by mistake, I told you what cause it is. It's a left atrial obstruction. So, what valve causes a left atrial obstruction? Mitral stenosis. Not even realization. Realization will again be left ventricular because the entire blood is again coming back to the left ventricle. Here it's mitral stenosis. The blood is not going into the left ventricle. So left ventricle will never fail in mitral stenosis. The left atrium will fail. Because of left atrial failure, that left atrial pressure will increase and go to the pulmonary veins and will go to the pulmonary arteries. Again pulmonary arteries. The third cause is mitral stenosis. And then of course, what any other cause other than these three? Huh? Okay, so we'll come to that. Now let's see what he has. Let's go ahead. So he's got severe pulmonary hypertension. How to diagnose him further? So the PGs yesterday were supposed to have shared his X-ray, ECG, echo. Then we could have gone further. So what did we hear? Yeah, we heard a very loud pulmonary artery sound, and we thought we also heard a slate S2. We were not very sure about it, but we thought so. Yes, we heard a very beautiful murmur, ejection system. Yes, who will tell us what is there?
It's rather midnight, sir.
Very good.
So from the farthest point on the right side, and the distance between the farthest point and midnight, plus from this the pulmonary at that point of
Okay.
pulmonary we measure the distance. So we'll add this things. And after that, we take the ratio, take the diameter of the chest.
How?
And
Yeah, how?
from the right and after right and left point of minutes, we measure what's the distance.
Yeah, but will you measure it like a straight line from there to there?
From midnight, we add both.
Right. So yeah, he's absolutely right. Although I think he's not shown it, but what he said was right. So basically midline, and from the midline, what is the longest? What is the longest? So from the midline, the longest length you will take in the heart, and the same thing you will do for the chest also. Longest line, and then you will add them. So you will add this. This is the thoracic. Then you will add that. There is the cardiac. Then your ratio just divided. It has to be more than 0.5. I am sure it will be more than 0.5. You can try it. You can measure it and see. Okay. So it is dilated. So a person has cardiomegaly. Now, is this cardiomegaly near the right ventricle or left ventricle? Because that is what we are trying to figure out when we are doing all this thing. So we cannot be sure at this. Streaky opacities or they are cloudy opacities, like clouds. So they are looking more cloudy. So when they are linear streaks, they are septal interstitial opacity. And when they are cloudy, they are alveolar opacity. So when you get alveolar opacities, when you have pulmonary edema. When do you have pulmonary edema? Yeah, when you have got a left ventricular failure. So it's possible that he is having a left ventricular failure with pulmonary edema. So that is what we are thinking while seeing the X-ray. Now ECG and one. This is the moderator band, this is the dilated artery, and this is the left ventricle. This looks much bigger than the left ventricle. But exactly we have to see what is this part of the interventricular septum is not well fixed to the aortic area, and there is something leaking from here. When they're moving the column from this is the left ventricle to the right ventricle. So there's a left to right shunt there. So whatever was closed has now opened again. It has been done to the interventricular septum or interatrial septum. From whatever I could make out in this video, it seems that there is something has been done to the interventricular septum. Just at the point where it touches the interatrial septum. That is where the defect is, and probably there is still a left-right shunt from whatever I could see in the video. So looks like that it was a VSD, and a VSD we know will cause left ventricular failure and all these problems, which he was facing a TND and all that. So yes, that's a good question. So why are we hearing ejection system and why not a pan-systolic? Because ejection system is generally heard in ASDs. Now in VSD we are supposed to hear a pan-systolic. So that is something which we cannot explain if it is only a VSD. So let us do the echo again and see. Let's look at the interventricular interatrial septum and focus on that. Because we have seen all other areas properly. Let us just put our focus on the interatrial and the interventricular septum. I think that's the most important thing we are giving. Next will be, it has got pulmonary edema, it has got hypoxia, what do you give? Oxygen, isn't it? And what are the other things? So preload and afterload. So Kavya, what is preload and what is afterload? More demands on the heart. So how does the inflammatory process in the body cause more demands on the heart? Yeah, many things. But maybe you can make it more structured and then share it later with some